height of your sport, maybe make, what, $1 million at most per fight. Does that anger you, and what can we do to change that?
I don't like to talk about exactly how much money I make, but I'm extremely comfortable and happy.
You are?
Yes.
Okay. So,
and, you know, if I got to a point where I had almost 50 fights, I would probably be making close to the same amount of money that Floyd does. But at this point, I have 11. So.
What do you think about all of the rapes that have been exposed in the media as fakes? It seems like a lot of the high-profile rape cases, the Duke Lacrosse, Columbia University, UVA, is that damaging a women's cause, or should we cover this stuff anyway because it's such an important issue?
It's such an important issue. I mean, because these people's lives are affected. It prevents them from living a sane and normal life. These are things.
As far as the institutional racism, all I would ask you to consider, you can believe what you want, but I would ask you to consider this. Shouting institutional racism does not actually combat racism. You have to find individual instances, and you have to show me who the racists are so that we can fight them together. What I find really problematic is the virtue signaling that I see by so many people on the other side, which is, I don't have to give you the racist, I don't have to tell you who he is or what measures I'm proposing. I just say institutional racism, everybody cheers for me because that's an approved point of view, and now we move on with our lives. You haven't helped anybody, you've just made yourself feel better.
I think that the idea of pointing to a racist person is fundamentally in contrast with the idea of institutional racism, because institutional racism grapples with implicit bias in the society as a whole, or not like a ghost in the machine, but in individuals.
Unless you're connecting that to a policy, it's a cop-out. Because now we're ghost hunting again. Racist behavior is evil. I want to fight it with you, but I can't fight it if you're not showing me what it is. And we have to decide together if the policies you're proposing will alleviate racism or exacerbate racism. And it turns out, I think, that a lot of the policies proposed by the left, I think institutional racism is a way, is usually a lever for proposing a policy that is actually unpalatable to freedom, and then castigating people on the other side of that policy as being in league with the institutional racism. But I think that slogans generally tend not to be particularly effective in getting us to solutions.
Wow. Can you believe that I only make 78%?
Actually, do you know what? No serious economist takes the wage gap seriously. Women aren't paid differently for the same work as men. You need to revisit the dictionary and learn the difference between wages and earnings. Wages and earnings. Wages and earnings. Wages and earnings. Wages and earnings.
Damn! That shit good!
If you think murder in Chicago is white people in the fancy parts of town, I'm afraid you're mistaken. Murder in Chicago is a black problem. Black Lives Matter wants nothing to do with it. There have been almost as many murders in Chicago since 2001 as there have been soldiers who have died in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. There's only a gap of about 900 between the 8,300 combat deaths and the 7,400 Iraq murders. That's from Homicide Watch Chicago, which is a media watchdog on crime in the city. That's why black babies in Chicago have to sleep in the bathtub, because Rahm Emanuel, the Democrats, and Black Lives Matter will not take action.
Damn!
Young people, then maybe we should talk about a blanket gun ban. And let's get to what the left really wants here. And you say that you're for the Second Amendment.
Why is it about left or right? Because in Britain this never is about left or right, this issue. Why is it here?
Well, we can talk about Britain in a second. I think the reason that it's about left and right here is because fundamentally the right believes that the basis for the Second Amendment, and they believe in the Second Amendment, the basis for the Second Amendment is not really about self-defense and it's not about hunting. It is about resistance to government tyranny. That's what the founders said, and that's what the right believes in this country.
Which tyranny are you fearing yourself?
I fear the possibility of a tyranny rising in this country in the next 50 to 100 years. Let me tell you something, Piers. The fact that my grandparents and great-grandparents in Europe didn't fear that is why they are now ashes in Europe. It's called evidence of racism. When there is no evidence of racism, it's probably not racism. When there is actual evidence of racism, it's probably racism. And the fact that everybody jumps from there's inequality and therefore there is inequity, just because there's inequality does not mean there was inequity.
But there has to be racism. You can't say there's no racism.
Without evidence?
No. I'm just saying that I don't know which animal. Maybe we're talking about dogs or something. I'm talking about human beings, and I'm like, human beings are most likely going to have racial prejudices. I'm just so sorry. I'm just so sorry. I don't know. I come from planet Earth.
Charles, I want to ask you a question. So your default is that when there is no evidence, racism is the deciding factor. That is
No, it's not saying that. I'm just saying that you're going to have sexists, you're going to have racists, you're going to have all this stuff. I mean, I'm just saying that...
I agree it exists, but the problem that I'm seeing, and this is the problem with the general conversation, is that there's no solution in simply saying there's racism out there. How does that solve anything? I mean, when you talk about there's institutional racism, what does that mean? Show me a law that is racist in intent, and we will agree. Show me a police officer who commits a racist act, like we saw in South Carolina, right, where a police officer shot a black man running away, and it was obviously unjustified, and I will agree. But you need... The idea that you can craft a narrative based on no racism because it just must be somewhere out there in the ether, that doesn't solve problems for anybody and creates more problems for people because now they grow up in a milieu and an environment where they are told that every obstacle they face is from some shadowy, nameless, faceless group who's out to get them simply because of the color of their skin. They'll never succeed in that environment.
I'm finding a lot of what you're saying extremely offensive. I don't think there's different types of feminists.
No, so would you say the feminists who say I want equality for both genders and one that says I want women to be superior are the same?
No, they're not feminists.
They're not feminists. Okay, well, I mean, you can say that, but that's the no true Scotsman theory. That's the no true Scotsman fallacy.
I just asked you if you were a feminist and you said no. And
no,
I'm a feminist because I believe in equality for men and for women and men and for all genders.
So women and men.
No, all genders.
No, so women and men.
There's women.
There are two genders biologically. I'm sorry.
There isn't. There's you're not now you're totally excluding transgender, non-binary, gender fluid people, and yeah, these.
I mean, you can live in your unicorn world.
I'm just assume that you're a cisgender straight woman because you obviously
that's really true.
and that you probably haven't ever been raped. Either.
I actually identify as an attack helicopter, so it's really offensive.
You sound like you're speaking from a very privileged point of view here.
Very privileged.
Yes.
I would like you to use my pronouns if you could. They're I, me, and my.
So now you're mocking the LGBTQ community now.
I have lots of LGBTQ friends, and they don't get professionally offended at everything. My LGBTQ friends are usually male and female and not some unicorn gender that's been made up.
That's so hateful. You're just like erasing, construct.
Gender's a social construct, right? And I don't have boobs. That's just a social construct. Oh, and penises don't exist, right?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
There's male and there's female. There are two biological genders. Science exists. I'm sorry to tell you all that science exists, but it does.
And I'm sure I know a lot of people.
And I mean, science probably disagrees with you.
Validate those people's experiences, like transgender people. That's so important to their lives and their identity and their happiness and their well-being and their health. How can you deny the existence of these people's identities and their need to have that well-being?
They can do whatever they want. That doesn't mean science or myself have to agree with you believing you are agender, you believing you're a demigirl or some non-existent gender that's been made up.
It's non-existent. It's incredibly important to them.
You know what else is important?
Finish her.
Science, facts, and biology. Those are also very important to the advancement of the human race, to treating people's diseases, to reproduction.
Yo, what the fuck? Damn!
I've decided to do the same thing. I'm going to be Hillary Clinton now. And that's and just change it like that. Well, I mean, she did say.
And now all of a sudden you got to look her up.
Yeah, she did say that she was different though from Barack Obama because she was a woman, Gavin.
Oh my God, I'm so tired of melanin and genitalia in political elections. Can we have some nerds, please? Can we have some economics and some foreign policy? Politics is Dungeons and Dragons. We need nerds in the White House, not cool people and not women just because they're women.
Another one. Now, we have this idea that before feminism came along in the 60s and 70s, that domestic violence against women was completely socially acceptable. Now, I don't understand how one can come to that conclusion when the President of the United States wanted to bring back corporal punishment, which had been banned, right, in most states at that time, exclusively to punish men who batter their wives. And especially since the treatment in communities for men who were battered by their wives, of which there were many, and you can see friezes and artwork from the 1600s and the 1700s that show women battering their husbands with their rolling pins and their skillets and all of that. Robbie Burns' Ode to a Henpecked Husband, all of those things. There were women who were abusive to men at that time, and the treatment that the community gave those men was either the Skimmington Ride, which was the practice of the community coming around the house at night and beating pots and pans and screaming and throwing things at the house to shame him for allowing himself to be beaten by his wife. Or they put him on a donkey backwards, holding its tail, and rode him around the town square and threw, or strapped him to a cart, and threw rotten fruit and vegetables at him to shame him for allowing his wife to beat him. Okay? And these things have been just quietly erased from modern scholarship and modern accounts of history, right? Back when we thought it was okay to beat your wife, right? When we thought it was okay to beat your wife, at least when it was extremely egregious, particularly egregious, we'd strap the guy to a whipping post and give him 30 lashes. When your wife was beating you, right, it was you that got punished by the community, right? So I don't know that feminism has a balanced perspective on any of these things. I really don't.
Another one. You know, how do you make a case when they were providing 16 of the 20 mandated items, and the ones they didn't was like the morning after pill, because they believe life begins at conception? Can't you respect somebody's deeply held religious views?
First of all, I don't believe that a commercial business has religious views.
It's a family business, a family-owned run business.
Okay, and what if that family were a Christian Scientist? Could they deny all health care? I think we've taken the idea that...
That's a horrible misunderstanding of the Religious Freedoms Restoration Act.
I am sorry. I'm quite familiar with religious freedom. And
apparently you're not, because you apparently, Patricia, you're not familiar with it.
I'm sorry. Do I get to speak, or is she just going to dominate over everything I try to say?
I'll correct you. If you want to dominate, then bring more intelligence to the debate.
Fatality.
Another one. You said you weren't much of a father when they were young.
No.
You better now?
Much. I get better as people get older. But most men are pretty hopeless when newborn bundles arrive. And they're so incredibly impressed by how women appear to know what to do. And then they think, well, I'll go off and do extra work and make some money, and they justify it in that way.
Christopher, I've heard you say this.
Yeah. And now you're hearing me say it again?
No, but my point would be that I think after the 70s that is actually not true. That may have been true, but I don't think that is true, that men are so less capable of dealing with children, and that it's better that they go off and earn money. You know, maybe the mother could go and earn some money. Did that never occur to you?
I'm not having any woman of mine go to work.
You know you're going to get into trouble if you go down there.
No, I won't. No, they don't need to work. They can if they like, but they don't have to.
You are joking, aren't
No, I'm not. No, I would expect to take care of them. They work if you want, but you don't have to.
You are the commander's son, aren't you? Yes.
I am, yes.
You really mean that?
Sure.
You don't think women should go and work?
Yeah, I said they're welcome to do that. I'm thrilled if they want to. But if they don't want to, they don't have to.
Is this you being ironic? Is this your famous attachment to irony?
No. What's so difficult about it?
It's just wrong. It's just absolutely wrong.
No, they're called the gentle sex for a good reason. You want to see them coarsened in the coarsened in the labour market? No. Not if they don't want to. They shouldn't feel
61,
they shouldn't feel they
not
have to.
180.
No, that's my view. I don't think a Mrs. Hitchens should have to work.
It's been lovely to have you. Thank you so much.
It's very nice of you to invite me.
Please, a huge thank you to the sexist but charming Christopher Hitchens.
Thank you, Dan. That was it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You had to say it. Thanks a lot.
The second principle that animates the left is group justice rather than individual justice. There's another name for group justice, that's social justice. Social justice, you should understand, is actually evil. Social justice, when people say it, it's an actual evil. Because anytime you put a modifier in front of a term that is inherently good, you turn it into a perversion of itself. Damn! So correctness, right? If you are correct, there's truth and there's something false, you are correct. Once you add political in front of that, you're not talking about truth and falsity anymore. You're talking about if you say the wrong thing, you get shot. Damn! The same thing is true of social justice. Justice is a good. You do something, it's either good or it's bad, and you get what you deserve. That's what justice is. Add social in front of that, and you're inherently saying injustice is better than justice. Right? Social justice suggests that, I, as a supposedly white man, Jews became white people as soon as we became successful in America. I, as a white man, I am responsible for paying slavery reparations, for example, in the name of social justice, even though all of my ancestors were busy getting killed by Cossacks in Russia at the time that slavery was taking place. Damn! And less than 5% of white Americans alive today have ancestors who ever held slaves. Damn! Every white person in America, though, has to pay because of group justice. How is that just? It's not. But it's group justice. It's social justice. And valuing the collective, valuing people in terms of groups rather than individuals, is how you get to the point where murder in the name of the collective is okay. Damn! All you have to do to see this is just compare the American Revolution, which was about individualism, with the French Revolution, which was about collectivism. Right? The American Revolution, John Adams wrote in the Declaration of Rights for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, he specifically wrote about all men being born free and equal with certain inalienable rights. It mirrors the Declaration of Independence in the United States. If you look at the Declaration of the Rights of Man in France during the French Revolution, it's the opposite. The 1789 Declaration of the Rights of Man says, the principle of all sovereignty resides essentially in the nation. No body nor individual may exercise any authority which does not proceed directly from the nation. It says law is the expression of the general will. So the collective always rules the individual. The group always rules the individual. And because the group always rules the individual, and because the group is always, this is a very utopian view of the world, because, see, the left doesn't believe in individual justice or that it can be achieved, but group justice can be achieved. But to pursue group justice is a utopian vision. You have to have this utopia in your head. Well, if the group is more important than the individual, and the individual is in the way of progress, just steamroll the individual. Damn! And that's why you end up with communism killing 100 million people. Damn! Because the bottom line is that if you are seeking equality of outcome on a group level, and somebody is an outlier, well, they're standing in front of the machine, and they have to go. Individuals are either tools of the regime or they are obstacles to the regime.
Hannity, in a move that is raising a lot of eyebrows around the country, California Liberal Governor Jerry Brown has signed a controversial bill into law allowing transgender students in public schools to choose which restrooms, which locker rooms they want to use, and whether they participate in boys or girls sports. Now, the new measure allows the 6.2 million elementary and high school students in the state to, quote, participate in sex-segregated programs, activities, and facilities based on their self-perception rather than their birth gender. Now, while California is the first state to pass such a law, not everyone's on board. Opponents of the law are questioning what it means for the other students. What about their privacy?
You know, I don't know what kind of crazy world we live in exactly, Sean, when we decide that the best way to stop bullying is to pass a law where we introduce opposite members of the sex into opposite sex bathrooms and locker rooms where regardless of the comfortability of... Yeah, and in sports teams, regardless of how other students feel, you're going to force acceptance. I mean, that's something that, you know, again, this comes back to things that are taught in the home. I talked to a school psychologist today who has been in this industry, for the lack of a better term, for 30 years. And the problem with all of this is you're allowing the government to set boundaries for children instead of children and their parents establishing and respecting their own boundaries. I mean, I know that if I was, you know, still a little girl and I'm, you know, using the girls' restroom and there's a boy that walks in that restroom, you know, when you're young girls, you're like, there's a boy in the restroom. I mean, because it's different. When I was a little kid too, Sean, when I was like 5 or 6, because this goes from K to 12, I wanted to be a flower. So I don't know how well these kids know about the sexual identity and transgender and all of that. How
I
they
didn't know
identify.
anything about this. I still don't, for the most part.
No.
All right, Leslie, so a 16-year-old boy has a self-perception he's a girl, and he's going to play on what? The girls' varsity tennis team?
Well, he certainly can try. I played on the boys' soccer team, although anatomically I am a female, I can give you that. Never wanted to be a flower, and it was because we didn't have a girls' team. In this situation, when you have a transgender child and you have 16-year-old boy perceiving and living and dressing as a girl, think about the amount of verbal, emotional, and physical abuse he has and will continue to endure when he's on the boys' teams or ostracized from those teams and prevented from being on those teams or being put in the locker room.
Must go.
That's not going to get better being on a girls' team. I'll tell you that. It's not going to get any better than being on a girls' team.
And I don't disagree with you there, Dana. That's where we agree. That's where we agree. I'm not sure this legislation
it seems like
will
a totally,
reduce
for the lack of a
bullying.
better term,
It will reduce one side of the bullying.
Say it. What are you saying, Dana?
I mean,
no.
It seems, it seems bass-ackwards, just to be frank, that sort of strategy. Let's go ahead and have a boy go on a girls' team because that's going to get him less bullied.
What will?
You know what will get individuals less bullied?
Reduce the
well, when they can look to adults, and adults don't bully each other. We bully each other in politics. We bully each other in television. Kids today have no role models except for the parents who are out there and doing good things and a few upstanding people in pop culture. Other than that, I feel horrible for children today because I look around at their choice of role models, and frankly, it's slim pickings. So, it starts with us.
Another one. You reap the rewards of these women's sacrifices every day of your life. When you grin with your cutesy side about how you're not a feminist, you ignorantly spit on the sacred struggle of the past 200 years. You bite the hand that has fed you freedom, safety, and a voice. In short, kiss my ass, you ignorant little jerks. Speaking of ignorance, it seems you don't know that over the past 200 years, there has been more than one wave of feminism. And someone can support older versions of feminism without supporting the new ones. So in short, we are not in fact biting the hand that fed us freedom, safety, and a voice, but instead we are not taking the one that encourages us to join them in their fight for supremacy and entitlements. We respect the women who have fought for equality in the past by taking that equality and acting like equals to men, instead of claiming we deserve more entitlements like spoiled little brats, and setting back the world's view of women 70 years. So no, I won't kiss your big green over-emotional feminist ass.
Why do then the different parts of the society do better than others?
I would look at it differently. I would say, and especially in the United States, I would say, why would we expect different groups to do the same? I say especially the United States because there are very few indigenous Americans. Americans that come here from all over the world. And why would you ever expect that countries that had entirely different histories, located in entirely different climates, different geography, why would you expect those countries to develop exactly the same mix of skills to exactly the same degree so that their people would arrive on these shores in such a way that they would be represented evenly across the board? Especially since even in countries where most of the population is indigenous, you don't find it there. The Germans arrived here with piano-making skills, and therefore you shouldn't expect to find the Irish equally represented with Germans in the piano industry. So when you find Steinways and other German-named pianos, you shouldn't expect to find O'Houlihan pianos to the same extent, and so on. Nowhere in the world do you find this evenness that people use as a norm. And I find it fascinating that they will hold up as a norm something that has never been seen on this planet and regard as an anomaly something that is seen in country after country.
I
I'm familiar with studies that show that there are no consequences for trans people that use cross-hormone therapy, and I'm familiar with many studies that show that there are great benefits to their health and well-being because
I've got it
they've
right
used
here.
them. Now,
Transsexuals had brain volumes in agreement with their sex at birth. The intracranial volume and the hypothalamus volume of males were larger than females, irresponsive of condition of transsexualism. This supports the notion that the brain volume changes in transsexuals are related to cross-sex hormone treatment and do not reflect pre-existent differences in brain volume between transsexuals and comparisons. So, isn't it possible for a doctor to take this? This comes from medical journals to say, well, we know the changes occur after the sex hormone replacement therapy, and we know that that can be bad, so let's hold off. Or is that doctor ignorant? Because I want to make sure we frame in the language, because there are a lot of doctors out there who would probably agree with you, except for when it comes to the medicine.
I mean, that's not the mainstream understanding whatsoever. You have one study that has one particular factual. No, it's not what the American Medical Association says. It's not what the American Psychiatric Association says. You have one doctor, Paul McHugh at Johns Hopkins, who has many anti-LGBT biases.
Well, hold on, you talked about doctors. Now you've gone from what's mainstream. You said I've not seen those, so we've provided you with empirical data studies. You said, well, I've not seen that. And then you go to some doctors say this, and we could both agree, right? There's a political motivation behind a ton of what happens in the medical industry. I'm sure we're on board with that, probably with big pharmaceuticals, probably with medical boards. We'd agree on that when it comes to a lot of things. So now we've denied the data and the statistics, and we've gone to what one doctor has said.
I'm on board with medical organizations actually using, I'm only familiar with one doctor who advocates against cross-hormone therapy and transitioning for trans people, and that's Paul McHugh at Johns Hopkins, and that's where Johns Hopkins gets that reputation. So I'm not familiar with the study that you cited. I'm not sure I understand what it is you're concluding from that study, except something about how brains change. But what I know is
the difference is I've not concluded something.
That shows that. Excuse me, I'd like to finish.
It's not fair. I can't let you get away with that, though, and say I only know one doctor. That's not accurate, Zach. There's more than one doctor on planet Earth who thinks that injecting estrogen into a man or abnormal levels of testosterone into a woman could be bad. The only point I'm making here is that doesn't mean that this sector of the medical industry or America or the world means they're bigoted or ignorant. You're drawing a conclusion. I'm not. I'm saying, is it within the bounds of reason that a doctor may not want to treat that because the science isn't in, and it doesn't necessarily make them a transphobic bigot? It's a simple question.
Fuck capitalism, fuck racism, fuck sexism, Islamophobia, and fuck Trump supporters. What's your biggest problem with Trump?
All his views.
Can you name one?
He's sexist.
In what sense?
The fact that he doesn't support abortion and the woman's right to choose.
But I think a good 50% of women in America are also pro-life.
A lot of women aren't.
Right, but if 50% of a group is something, then...
I'd like to see those statistics.
All right, well, if hypothetically 50% of the women were pro-life, would it still be sexist to be anti-abortion?
I'd really like to see your statistics.
I know, but hypothetically, if I was right...
I don't go by hypothetical.
Well, we don't have a computer here. We can't look it up.
So I can't answer your question.
All right. What happened in there?
I was protesting for what I feel is right.
Were you right up at the front?
I was not.
Oh. What was the protesting? Just yelling?
Yeah.
And then you got dragged out?
Yeah.
Freaking jerk. I gotta hand it to you. It is pretty brave to come here. I mean, the odds of you getting punched are pretty high.
I know.
Like if you went to a Rush concert, this is the analogy I keep using, and you yelled Rush sucks, and then on the way out you were telling people that you don't like Rush.
Supporters here and you're talking to the one idiot. Good.
I got a lot of people. So what are you gonna do now? Just walk home?
Yeah. I have a job, thank you.
What is your job?
I'm a graphic designer.
Are you gay?
I am queer.
Oh, you don't use the term gay?
Well, I'm not gay, I'm bisexual.
Oh, I've always been suspicious of bisexual. It seems like a phase.
Oh, well.
I see a lot of old bi people.
Oh, well, you're pretty ignorant.
Okay, well, this has been very enlightening.
J fucking K. Mr. I don't go off of hypothetical statistics.
And I'd be careful going home. I'm not threatening you. I'm saying genuinely.
Well, it seems like a threat.
No, look, I'm with these guys. I'm not going to chase you down the street, but safe travels, friend.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Okay, bye.
Okay, goodbye. Have a nice night.
I mean, of all the things you can say about him, it is kind of brave. I mean, he's a fucking idiot, but he's a brave idiot. You're an American student feminist human against Trump.
I am.
What's your biggest problem with him?
Mostly everything. It's pretty hard to pinpoint it, but
I've noticed that's an issue with these people. Can you just give me one little maybe sentence he said that you disagree with, or one policy he's going to enact? So far your biggest beefs are that he described his daughter as attractive, and that his penis came up in a debate that you haven't seen.
not my biggest beefs, no.
Well, that's all we got. Well, you got a big one?
Yeah, he's racist, he's sexist. I haven't heard really any firm policy.
Well, we just keep hearing these terms, racist. What's a racist thing he said?
That he insinuating that Mexico is sending their rapists?
They are. 80% of the young girls who cross the border get raped. I thought you feminists hate rape.
I do.
So do you think 80% is a pretty bad stat for women getting raped? 80% of the women crossing the border get raped.
By Americans?
No, by illegals.
Okay. Thanks.
Don't thank me. I didn't rape anybody.
I didn't say you did, but you're coming and you're spinning everything that.
I'm just trying to tell you basic information.
80%.
80% of young women who cross the border get raped.
By illegals?
Yes, by coyotes and illegals. Why wouldn't you have looked?
Coyotes, goodbye.
Bears.
Let me suggest another reason why people of color, to use the left's preferred expression, is sometimes a little reluctant to express libertarian or conservative points of view. And I'll tell you something that happened to me at American University a few days ago. Guy lined up for the Q&A, very politely, black guy. He said, I was physically threatened by Black Lives Matter on my way in here just for coming to hear you speak. And if you don't believe me, it's on camera. He was...
Wait, hold on. Did she just change your mind?
What?
Did she just change your mind? I think I felt a shift because she yelled shit out.
Yes, she interrupted me with a bogus buzzword, I'm convinced. And what he said to me was, what do I say? What do I say to black people who have bought into this nonsense when I just want to go about my business listening to a talk? And I said to him, well, they are guilty of the worst kind of racism. They're guilty of the kind of racism that suggests all black people must think alike. They are guilty of the kind of racism that insists...
Excuse me, the center. Thank you for your enthusiasm. If you'd please be seated. Thank you.
They're guilty of the kind of racism that suggests that all black people must think the same. They're just in the same way that people who have problems with me being a gay conservative are guilty of a sort of homophobia, a real homophobia, which actually does delegitimize and belittle a particular group and sort of put them in a box. And he said, well, what do I say to these people? And I said, well, look, here's what you say to them. You go out, you calmly and politely, you say, if you believe that the civil rights struggle matters at all, if you believe that the fight to allow black people to have their voices heard, to have an equal footing with whites in this country, if you believe in the restitution and reparations after slavery, if you believe that it is an important goal to hear black voices, hear mine. Because not every black person agrees with Black Lives Matter. Not every gay person believes in the gay lobby. Not every woman is a feminist. And this kind of identitarian politics that we heard from the front that crucifies people who step outside of their racial or sexual groups because they have the wrong ideology is the worst sort of bigotry. And those people... And if you're wondering why people of color are sometimes scared, not scared in the way social justice warriors pretend to be scared because a conservative is on campus, but black people are actually scared because somebody got assaulted at American University the other day. If you are wondering why there aren't more people of color standing up for these sorts of opinions, you might want to pull out a mirror.
student reporters from
agree with
filming the
that.
protests she was promoting. Guess how you promote them? Put them on
Exactly.
TV.
I do agree with that, and I think that Josh Earnest has said the same thing. There's a very thick line between
apologized now,
being
by the way.
politically incorrect and being racist, and words matter. So when a community of people that has been perpetually marginalized at institutions across America over history feels offended, we should acknowledge that. And I think that these protests are a reflection of a community of minorities that feel unacknowledged and not respected. And so, Ben, I read your article today, and I was shocked by the language you used. You were saying that it's time for the right
call the police
to
right now.
fight. Yeah. No, but you read his column.
Evidence. All this is screaming and feelings. How about like a shred of evidence, even for the incidents that actually happened at Missouri that drove this? Really? Where was the police report exactly when it came to, for example, the first N-word incident that led all of this? There was no police report on any of that. In the second incident, at the N-word at the University of Missouri, the administration investigated, and the kid's under investigation. In the third incident with the cop car, with the car hitting the
Let me
guy.
just ask you this, because we're short on time. You tell me, Namiki, whether we are training these kids to be little cupcakes who never have to encounter anything offensive, assuming everything you said is offensive. They never have to encounter it because they can call the cops or they can get their administrators fired, or whether it's better to educate them that there are offensive things in life, there are insulting things in life, there are people who will say very incorrect or impolite things about you, politically incorrect things about you, very publicly, and in a way that you might feel very offended by. And you have to deal with that in life.
Well, you know, $15 an hour, first of all, as we said, it's not enough of a wage, but it is a substantial improvement, and this is what workers have put forward. Fast food workers themselves courageously took their lives into their own hands, walked out of their jobs in a one-day strike in New York City, and demanded $15 an hour. And that is the first step, because the economy is not going to remain static. We have to fight for affordable housing. We have to fight for better services in terms of mass transit, education, healthcare, and that is why we have to also talk about taxing the super wealthy and big corporations.
Well, I mean, of course one government policy leads to the next. If you raise the minimum wage, then it's going to raise the rents. When it raises the rents, you're going to have to build affordable housing. When you have to build affordable housing, you have to tax people to build the affordable housing. When you tax people to build the affordable housing, people move out of the city, and you have to raise taxes on the people who remain in the city, and this is how you hollow out the economy of a major metropolitan area in the United States.
This actually happened to my eldest son, who's in grade 8. He was in the schoolyard playing. A grade 1 girl walked up to him, slapped him across the head, and said, "You are not allowed to hit girls. You cannot hit me back."
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to...
Well, at least she was being honest. You know, and an adult woman who would do that would probably find a way to turn herself into the victim.
Women deserve a safe space on campus. Queer people deserve a safe space on campus. Trans people deserve a safe space on campus.
Groups exist because of that, right?
You mean enough? Why do men need a safe space on campus?
Why do men need a safe space? Because the very idea of an event where men are talking about men's issues in a non-sanctioned manner, then you have what happened at the Warren Farrell protest. I don't know if you watched the footage of that, right? But if I were one of the men who was trying to attend an event talking about male suicide and all kinds of other stuff, and I had some woman who knows she can get away with it up in my face, calling me every name in the book, screaming at me, I don't think I'd feel very safe, right? Okay? And frankly, men are the majority of victims of public sphere violence.
I'm not saying that any of those statistics or male suicide, any of that stuff exists, because it does. Men are the victims of more workplace violence, workplace like suicides, low enrollment rates. That said, that's not systematic oppression in society.
Really? I think that when a 6-year-old girl can hit another child and get away with it, and never, ever have to suffer retaliation because he's a boy. Okay? I think that's systematic. How? Because if the system intervenes and punishes the boy for hitting back, right? It's systematic.
You just yelled out that all of us were racist. And then you asked a question. And then you asked a question. And the question was? Why are there only white people on your panel? There you go. It sounded better when you were yelling it with a chorus of backdrops. Let me explain. Okay, can I answer your question? Can I answer your question? Do you want an answer? Would you like an answer? Here's what's in, no, you don't know the answer, sweetheart. Let me answer it for you. Listen, you have, right here on this panel, you have a gay British Trump supporter, okay? You have a lifelong registered Democrat, open feminist, who's not a third wave feminist, and you have a French-Canadian Christian conservative. So you may ask, why is there only white people? Because the only diversity you don't care about is that of intellectual diversity.
Right. Yes, yes.
Please be seated.
One second.
Please be seated.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the applause.
I think that that if we want young people to speak out and to feel comfortable expressing themselves, then what we need to do is make the internet a place where they can do so. That means bringing in sensible laws and training the police to deal with these kind of things. With this, we need straightforward training on what, when to act and when not to act, to make sure that the worst things, the rape and the death threats, the horrific harassment and abuse is dealt with. And I think that when we see a few high-profile individuals, perhaps including some in this studio, locked up, it'll be time for other people to back off.
Okay,
and I very, very much look forward to that day.
People can be made to feel victimised and very nervous and scared of the internet, whether that be men or women. But actually, I want to put, and it's both kind of very pathetic view of how people deal with insults and words, because really most people, especially on Twitter, when they receive this kind of
rape and death.
Rape and death threats are bad, but when they receive this kind of rubbish on Twitter, they block or they ignore. And I really want to pick up on this idea that women,
Please, Kate, let us.
it's very telling. That's kind of, this is what happens. Middle-class women decide that they want to take on the plight of women and that women are victimised. Women can't handle the internet. It's absolutely ridiculous and disgusting and sexist and patronising to say that women can't handle the internet. The internet should never be a safe space. The internet women should be able to experience everything about public life. We fought for that throughout history, and here's somebody who wants to shut us away from it.
White family worth, in terms of financial worth, is 69 times more than that of black families. Given this disparity, how can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. And when you have a culture that doesn't, you know what? Explain to me. You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. Explain, if it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
Anybody can jump in. It's an open mic there.
What do you want?
We gotta stop listening to this rhetoric that's in the media.
Michelle, what do you people want?
What do I want?
Michelle.
When you say you people, what do you mean?
The complaining black people, blaming others for the failure of their parents and their lives, blaming others for whatever it is you complain about. What is it exactly do you want from white people?
First of all, I'm just going to take a breath. And
I'm trying to find out what you want.
What's your nationality?
American.
Are you white?
I'm black American.
Oh, okay.
What do you want?
You Caucasian.
Oh, you do? And why do you think that? Why do you think that?
because you seem to separate yourself from us, should I say?
In
put
what
us on
way?
the other side
In what
of
way?
the fence. In the ways that you've specified thus far.
Meaning what? Tell me, give me an example and tell me what you mean.
How you mean? What do you people want from white people? Meaning that I'm not with you.
Oh, okay, I
It's
got you.
just y'all by yourself, right?
Let me explain why I do that. What you don't know is that there are two realities in life. One is that of good and one is that of evil. And now that I've been able to overcome evil, I don't identify with angry, evil black people. I identify with other blacks and others who are on the side of good. And so that's why I say you people, because I have to divide myself or separate myself from evil and go along with good. So that's why I do that.
What is it that makes us evil?
I'm sorry, your anger, your blaming others for your problems, your lack of love and respect for yourself and others.
Can you give me an example of something he said or done that's sexist or racist?
Oh yes, Trump has called for many policies that would hurt working class women, that would hurt women of color. Trump is an enemy of the people and an enemy of progress in all things. Yeah.
But can I have a specific example, please?
Well, the specific examples are the examples of his speeches, the things he said about Muslims in his debates, his desire to build a wall around the United States to keep immigrants out. Trump has consistently
illegal immigrants.
People who have been driven out of their country because of imperialism and who have come here to find a better life. So the people that are here have every right to be here, and Trump wants to pass policies that will make life harder for them.
So are you saying you don't want a border?
We want all people to be able to come here and have
legally or illegally.
We want people to come here and have access to basic material things, from education to healthcare. We want people to be able to come here and get a job with a decent wage. And we don't want anybody to be terrorized by the kind of policies that Donald Trump and his puppets want to have passed.
Are you willing to pay for illegal immigrants' homes and education?
We want to have a society where immigrants can come here and get access to decent housing, and where immigrants...
But are you willing to pay for it?
Well, we think that society should take up the task of caring for people, and so yes, I would like to see a society where everybody is equal and has access to the same basic kind of material things that they need to live and to survive and to get around in the world.
So would you volunteer your home and your goods in your home for an illegal immigrant to come live with you and stay?
Yes, we would like to see all immigrant people have access to housing in all communities. There are many apartment facilities here that are empty. In fact, there are many houses that are empty, and they're empty because people can't afford them and get access to them. People are consistently many people are being affected by these policies, getting evicted, and we would like to see everybody actually have access to that, and housing be a basic kind of human right.
So we can go down the street and get a couple homeless guys and take them to your house, and you'll take them in?
Another one.